I really enjoy and admire your work, and we've got some stories that are relevant to the themes that you cover. So let's plunge into them. How about this first one? The dancing Israelis just won't stop dancing. The FBI has actually released some dancing Israeli documents. Believe it or not, after all of these years, they finally responded to a FOIA request. And we can see some lousy copies, massively redacted copies of some of the pictures that the dancing Israelis took as they apparently were pre-positioned to film and massively celebrate the destruction of the World Trade Center. Adam, what do you make of this?
Well, actually, the citizen that got the FOIA request sent them to me first, and I had the privilege of publishing them on my channel. It was Dancing Israeli FOIA Photos Revealed, and then since then, it's been spreading all over the alternative to the alternative media. But my biggest takeaway, number one, is that none of the mainstream media is talking about these, unsurprisingly. So they're complicit in the cover-up, continuing on. And even the old alternative medias like InfoWars and Alex Jones, who used to pretend like they were all about 9/11 truth, I haven't seen them touch on these at all either.
Isn't that interesting? And still, you'll find people in the mainstream denying that there ever were any dancing Israelis. That's all an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, they say. I was just told that on Press TV when I was debating Lee, what's his name, from the Bay Area, that crazy Zionist extremist. He said, oh, that's just an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Well, we've got the FBI documents now. Sivan Kurtzberg, Paul Kurtzberg, Oded Eldner, and Yaron Shemuel, Omar Mamari, those guys, they're back happily in Israel now, actually went on television in Israel and said their job was to document the event. How did they know there was an event to document? Well, how about these photos, Adam? Do you think there's anything really new in these photos? What I thought was interesting, and it was highlighted in this article at Mint Press, is that it looks like there may have been photos taken the day before. That is, they may have actually gone, there might be photos of the lighter, the guy holding up the lighter in front of the trade towers. He did that the day before, as well as on the morning of 9/11. There's all kinds of evidence here for foreknowledge.
Well, witnesses saw them, and their van was spotted as early as 8 a.m. So we've always known for years from the FBI records that they were there before the towers. Also, their stories didn't corroborate with one another. They were lying. They denied. They refused to take polygraph tests for a while when they were in jail. But the thing about these photos being so heavily redacted, like this just isn't because of photocopies. They destroyed the originals, but they made photocopies. But they altered these to hide the background because it would be so powerful, and they hid their faces. Because just imagine if we had these photos with the faces, their happy, satisfied, smiling faces, and then the towers on fire behind them. That circulating would be horrible optics, and it would really the imagery would just be a shock to people to make them, send them down the rabbit hole and research what these dancing Israelis are all about.
And interestingly, the FBI had completely redacted its answer to question number 1. Did the Israeli nationals have foreknowledge of the events at the World Trade Center? And were they filming the events prior to and in anticipation of the explosion? That the answer to that question and that section of the FBI report is redacted in its entirety. What does that tell you?
I think that gives us the answer. We know the witnesses saw that they were there before. Also, there was another point where they were parked in a park, and then once the towers were hit, they shut down the park. So only people that were there before were able to get in, and their van was there. And also, there was like the phone calls on 911 saying, oh, I see a white van and it looks like some Palestinians. So I think they were trying to have a whole narrative to blame Palestinians for these white vans. But the witness saw them, they got arrested. So they had to kind of scratch that idea to include the Palestinians in all of this 9/11 blaming.
Of course, Trump is still reading from that the dancing Palestinians or dancing Arabs script after all these years, which makes you wonder a little bit about the people who think that Trump is some kind of a closet 9/11 truther who's going to reveal everything. Well, how about the former employee who blew the whistle on his the spies at Urban Moving Systems? I guess they accidentally hired an American goy or something who who reported that, after he quit, he angrily about the America-hating Israelis who worked there. He quoted the Israelis of Urban Moving Systems, the Mossad front that employed the dancing Israelis, as saying, quote, "Give us 20 years and we'll take over your media and destroy your country." Well, I don't think it took them 20 years.
No, they had it already then too. And it's so crazy because years ago, Alex Jones and InfoWars produced a documentary called Fabled Enemies with Jason Burmis, where they included this dancing Israeli information. But now on Twitter the other day, we're trying to put pressure on them and saying, hey, why are you not covering this? And some of their supporters were saying, oh, that's tinfoil hat. And remember that the GDL trolled the Brett Favre into getting him to talk about dancing Israelis? Howard Stern covered that, and they said, oh, it's an anti-Semitic dog whistle to mention the dancing Israelis. So it's just completely shameful. This is no conspiracy. This is FBI records, witnesses, and reported on Dan Rather on the news and stuff. And yeah, Trump during the campaign said, oh, the Muslims were celebrating. Then he goes on Alex Jones and says, Jones goes, oh, you were vindicated. All the Muslims were celebrating. Even Dan Rather said it, when Jones knows full and well that was Israelis celebrating the Twin Towers being destroyed.
Indeed. And how about the explosives traces? The vans tested for having explosives, apparently. And that leads to the question of whether there were Mossad teams in the area that were planning to blow up the George Washington Bridge, the Lincoln Tunnel, and other area exits from the city, which would have massively increased the panic. There are reports of arrests of people in these Mossad white vans full of explosives, and those reports have gotten totally buried. Mm-hmm. Some say that Bernie Kerik, the mobbed up police commissioner who sent the dancing Israelis back to Israel, was responsible for the cover-up of the much more damning evidence surrounding the Israelis with those explosives, and the plan who were caught of just seconds or minutes or not very long before they were about to blow up the Lincoln Tunnel and the George Washington Bridge. And according to my Veterans Today sources, many dozens of people have been killed to keep this covered up. Now, that may be an exaggeration for all I know, but testing explosives in the dancing Israelis van does make you wonder.
Absolutely, yeah. And Kerik, his name was, who would on 9/11 would always step in for Giuliani and answer all the difficult questions. He actually went and visited Israel shortly before 9/11 and had some big loans associated with some top Zionists. And this, anybody that thinks this is a conspiracy, I'm sure that your audience won't, but ABC News admitted that this was a Mossad front at Urban Moving Systems. And there was other moving companies involved as well. White Gloves was another one. And when these guys were arrested later in the day, they had tons of cash stuffed in their sock. They instantly said, we're not your problem. The Palestinians are the problem, before anybody even mentioned anything about them being the terrorists. So, incriminating themselves by pleading that they weren't guilty. And then they also all had tickets to fly to different parts of the world the next day, which, there's no way that that's a coincidence that they're just randomly going to different places like that.
That's right. And, if you want the scoop on Mossad operations, there's a new book by Ronan Bergman called Rise and Kill First that I just finished and reviewed for the next issue of Crescent, that goes over the long history of the Mossad and other Israeli agencies doing targeted killings. And they've done far more of those than any other country, maybe more than every other country put together. It's another interesting window into the way the Mossad operates. And then the John le Carré novel, The Little Drummer Girl, which came from his discussions with a former high-level Mossad operative, also is a real revelation into how this agency operates. They're extremely reckless and willing to take these huge risks that no other country's agencies would ever even dream of. And that, again, leads us to suspect that our False Flag Weekly News colleague, Alan Zabrowski, former head of strategic studies at the U.S. Army War College, is right when he says that this was a Mossad operation, period, that there had to have been a major intelligence agency behind it, and the American agencies wouldn't do it. It was clearly Israel.
Yes, they are definitely very skilled in their assassinations and their hit squads. In the West Bank Yasser Arafat Museum, they had a whole display of all the Arab leaders who were killed by deceptive means, letter bombs, assassins, spies, and stuff. And just recently, it's been a lot of talk about Isaac Kappy, the Hollywood guy who spoke out about the pedophilia in Hollywood, and he just committed suicide. They say a few weeks ago or last week. And I watched one of his last videos he made. He was talking all about Mossad. He was pointing out all these Mossad agents that are in media. And then he was also talking about Black Cube over and over again, which is like the semi-private mercenary group of former Mossad agents, who also Anthony Bourdain mentioned in a tweet talking about Hillary and some of her problems. So, I mean, just connecting some dots here, it's pretty disturbing.
Well, we should have covered that story, but maybe I'll add a link to that at the False Flag Weekly News page down at the bottom, because I think we should look into that. Well, a related story to the dancing Israelis is the Kenneth Feinberg paying off thousands of survivors in hush money to prevent them from going through the legal process to try to find out who really killed their loved ones on 9/11. And now Kenneth Feinberg is handling the payoffs to round up victims, apparently. He really made his bones, I guess, on 9/11, and almost everybody took those payoffs. Only a handful refused. I guess Ellen Mariani refused and sued the U.S. government for doing 9/11. And other than that, just about everybody took Feinberg's money and lost their right to any kind of legal process.
Yeah, I've known about Feinberg since 9/11, and I was shocked to read in that article how he was also involved with he's doing the Monsanto glyphosate, and then he also did the BP oil spill and some other really high profile class action cases like this. And the first thing I thought of, it was the article out of the New York Times: judge in 9/11 suit feels no regret that no one ever went to trial. So the Judge Hellerstein in New York, who oversaw these cases for 9/11 victims' families, he says, no regret that none ever went to trial. So we got no trial. That means no discovery, no examination of the evidence. They just settled them all out of court one by one. Even though people tried to hold out, they got them all to do it. And just in the title, it says it all. Basically, he should have felt regret, but he didn't.
Well, yeah, I not only probably felt no regret, but probably felt a feeling of triumph. Hellerstein had connections. He's from a Zionist family from way back, and his son is apparently pretty high up in a security company in Israel that was taking care of the airports on 9/11. And when the Bruce Lichty, the lawyer for Ellen Mariani, tried to get Hellerstein to recuse himself from Ellen Mariani's lawsuit, trying to find out the real perpetrators of 9/11, Hellerstein ended up sanctioning the lawyer, Bruce Lichty, for having the temerity to make this anti-Semitic motion, asking the judge to recuse himself when he clearly did have a conflict of interest. So these are the kinds of roadblocks that they threw in the path of people seeking justice in our justice system. Well, 9/11 is set off the whole new world that we're in today, a world of serial wars and repression and censorship and Orwellian madness. And the next big thing is the seventh country in 5 years, right? Remember the 7 countries in 5 years that 9/11 was apparently designed to take out, according to the neocon informant of General Clark. Well, that's Iran. Country number 7, the last and the most important on the list of countries targeted by 9/11. And they're really getting targeted now. So next story, we have Trump getting taunted by a top Iranian official who says the U.S. is like the World Trade Center building that collapses with a sudden hit. In other words, he's saying that the United States is rigged for demolition. I think the United States is rigged for demolition in a sense. 9/11, in a sense, demolished the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also Trump has been doing sanctions, labeling them as terrorists, bringing over doing all these threats. But then recently he says, "Oh, why don't they just call me? Why don't they call me?" But then also he's saying, "Oh, they're going to be destroyed. They ever threaten us again, they'll be wiped away." And also recently, remember within the last year or so, I believe they were trying to blame 9/11 on Iran, saying that they were funding the hijackers and stuff, which is just this gift that keeps giving, is that the 9/11 myth. But meanwhile, Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran, goes to the UN and says the whole world knows that it was a Zionist plot. And then the ambassadors walked out, and you can do polls. They've done polls. Arab countries don't believe that it was Arabs that did 9/11. And also there's a headline out of a Business Insider saying that the king of Saudi Arabia says that 9/11 was a Mossad plot.
And Mohammed Morsi, the real president of Egypt, who still languishes in prison, is also on record as a 9/11 truther, as is Dr. Mahathir Mohamad in Malaysia.
And Bin Laden. Bin Laden's supposed hideout had loose change. It had 9/11 conspiracy books. So
what do you make of that, Adam? Because a lot of people doubt the Bin Laden story, the story of his killing. The idea that this Navy SEAL team raided Bin Laden's hideout, which was right next to the Pakistani military headquarters, and killed him, has all kinds of holes in it. Clearly, the official story of that is false, as Seymour Hersh, among others, have shown. But what the truth is totally unclear. But then they supposedly kill Bin Laden. They bring back his library, and they tell us that he was reading David Ray Griffin books. What are we supposed to make of this?
I don't know. Maybe they made that up so that the conspiracy types would believe that the raid was true. I don't know what to take away from that, because you'd think that they would put something else out there, not something that makes it seem like Bin Laden was questioning the official story. Because if he was really the mastermind, he wouldn't be wasting his time reading all these books about who was really behind 9/11. And if you look at his interviews he did with Pakistani newspaper and others right after 9/11, he didn't know who did it. He said it wasn't him. He was giving out his ideas. He thought they wanted to have a clash of civilizations. So, he definitely didn't come out and admit it like they all tried to claim he did.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, Bin Laden was a 9/11 truther. You don't hear that very often. Of course, that could be another way of demonizing the truth movement, because they've got everybody operating at this emotional, visceral level with no critical thought. So Bin Laden is just the enemy image, and so you slap that face onto the 9/11 truth movement, and you've got your psyop preventing people from thinking. So anyway, the war on Iran is looming now. We had the rocket attack in Baghdad. Obviously not exactly the shot heard around the world as a